To ensure access and address all forms of discrimination which inhibits the fulfillment of the right to education, equity is one of the fundamental values of Sustainable Development Goal 4. Despite a new agenda on sustainable development, achieving the goal of education for all still remains an unfinished agenda. There are more than 258 million children and youth who remain out of school. Despite increased enrollments in the past years, an estimated 250 million children were still not able to read and write. The lack of attention to equitable education also led to a global learning crisis, which costs $129 billion per year. According to OECD, on average, about only 10% students of the bottom 25% of socioeconomic status can perform to be in the highest 25% in the cognitive examination. According to UNICEF, low-income countries spend 46% of their public education budget on 10% most educated students. As inequalities often prevent educational achievement within disadvantaged groups, improving equity in education through policies and practices is critical to making a long-lasting positive impact on the lives of learners. Equity in education can be defined in many ways. When promoting equitable education, realizing individual potential is key. Here is an illustration of equality versus equity versus reality. The distinction between equality and equity is important. Advocating for equity would mean that we would recognize that individual socioeconomic circumstances should not be obstacles to learners' educational success. Now, let's look at how we put equity into practice. 1. Set the legal framework for equity in education. Establishing educational laws and acts is one of the most important first steps to set minimum standards to promote equity systematically. 2. Allocate sufficient budget. Once a legal framework is established, it should be clearly linked to the regular budget allocation of financial systems for sustainability. 3. Develop a delivery mechanism. With laws and policy and budget mechanisms in place, we must come with targeted strategies to incorporate equity into practice at all levels. And 4. Evaluate the impact. It is essential to show the evidence that budget spent on equitable education is the most efficient and beneficial not only for the individuals but also for society as a whole. In this series, we will look into 6 country cases: Finland, New Zealand, South Korea, Japan, the US, and Thailand that are implementing equity in education.